Imagine this. You've always believed you were straight, but one night, everything changes. Your roommate becomes more than just a roommate. He becomes someone you can't stop thinking about. In this emotional and heartfelt story, we explore the journey of self-discovery, love, and the unexpected twists life throws at you. Are you ready to dive into a tale that will make you question everything you thought you knew about yourself? Stay tuned for a story that will leave you both intrigued and inspired. I always thought I was interested in women until that one night with my roommate, Alex. I never expected my life to turn upside down when he moved in with me. He was the kind of guy people immediately liked. Easygoing with a boyish charm and a smile that could melt tension from any situation. I remember the day Alex moved in like it was yesterday. Our landlord had told me he'd found someone to share the apartment with me. A guy my age, clean, easygoing, and reliable. It sounded like a good setup, and for the first few months, that's exactly what it was. We split rent, cooked meals occasionally, and spent most evenings watching TV or playing video games. There was a kind of unspoken understanding between us. We weren't best friends, but we got along, and that was enough. But then things started to change. It wasn't something obvious at first. Alex was still the same guy. Confident, funny, always quick with a joke. He had this laid-back charm that drew people in effortlessly. I saw it with his friends, the way they'd laugh a little too hard at his jokes, the way they seemed to lean in just a little closer when he spoke. I never thought much of it, though. I'd always considered myself straight, with relationships with women being casual dates that never went anywhere serious. Alex's charisma was just Alex. I remember glancing at him and feeling something. It wasn't attraction, at least not in the way I'd ever understood it. It was more like curiosity, like my mind had stumbled upon a question it didn't know how to answer. But then there were the nights, those quiet hours when the world outside seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us in our small apartment. We'd sit on opposite sides of the couch, the glow of the TV illuminating his face as he absent-mindedly flipped through his phone or laughed at something dumb on the screen. It was during one of those nights that I first felt it. A strange pull like gravity was subtly shifting, drawing my attention toward him. At first, I chalked it up to the beers we'd each had a couple of, and the warmth in my chest made everything feel softer, easier. But then he stretched his arm, resting along the back of the couch, his shirt riding up just enough to reveal a sliver of skin. My eyes lingered a moment too long, and when I realized it, I quickly looked away, my face flushing with embarrassment. "Jake," Alex said, his voice cutting through the silence. I nodded quickly, keeping my eyes fixed on the TV. "Yeah, just tired." He didn't push, but I could feel his gaze on me, studying me with a curiosity that made my heart race. It wasn't the first time I caught him looking at me like that, but it was the first time it felt different. There was something unspoken between us, something I couldn't quite put into words, and for the first time, I wasn't sure if I wanted to. Over the next few weeks, that feeling only grew stronger. It wasn't just the way Alex looked at me, though. That was part of it. It was the way he brushed past me in the narrow hallway, his arm grazing mine just enough to send a jolt through my skin. It was the way his laughter lingered in the air long after the joke had ended, wrapping around me like a warm blanket. It was the way his presence filled the apartment, making it feel alive in a way it never had before. In the corner of my room, I lay there staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with thoughts I didn't want to acknowledge. I'd always been sure of who I was, what I wanted, but now everything felt different, confusing. I could hear Alex moving around in the living room, the faint creak of the floorboards as he paced. Curious, I got up and made my way to the doorway, leaning against the frame as I watched him. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights, his shoulders tense. "Can't sleep either?" I asked softly, breaking the silence. He turned, startled, but his expression quickly softened when he saw me. "Nah," he said, running a hand through his hair. "Just thinking about life stuff. You know how it is." I nodded, stepping into the room. "Yeah, I get it." For a moment, we just stood there, the silence between us heavy but not uncomfortable. I could feel the tension in the air, like a rubber band stretched taut, ready to snap. It was a feeling I'd grown used to over the past few weeks, but tonight it felt stronger, more intense. Alex broke the silence first. "Jake," he said, his voice quiet but steady. "Can I ask you something?" "Yeah, of course," I said. He hesitated again, his eyes searching mine. "Have you ever thought about us? Not as roommates, but something more?" The question caught me off guard, and for a moment, I didn't know how to respond. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the heat rising to my face. I stammered, my thoughts scrambling for something coherent to say. "I don't know." Alex stepped closer, his gaze never leaving mine. "I think about it," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "More than I probably should." My breath caught in my throat, and I could feel my pulse racing. This was uncharted territory, a line we'd never crossed before. But as I looked at him standing there in the dim light of a living room, I couldn't deny the truth. I felt it too. "I don't know what this is," I said finally, my voice shaky but honest. "But I feel it." Alex smiled softly, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "That's enough," he said. We stood there for a while longer, the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of clarity, like the pieces of a puzzle were finally starting to fall into place. But I knew for sure this wasn't over, and so did he. The following days felt like walking on a tightrope. Alex and I didn't talk about what had happened that night, but the air between us was charged with an undeniable tension. Every shared glance, every accidental brush of hands carried a weight that neither of us could ignore. It was both exhilarating and terrifying. I found myself hyper-aware of his presence in ways I never had before. When he walked into a room, it was like the atmosphere shifted, the air growing thicker, more electric. I caught myself studying him more often, his casual movements, the way his smile lit up his face, the way his laugh seemed to echo in my chest. It was like seeing him for the first time, and it was driving me crazy. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I came home to find Alex sprawled out on the couch, a beer in one hand and his phone in the other. He glanced up as I walked in, his lips curving into a lazy smile that made my stomach flip. "Rough day?" he asked, sitting up to make room for me. "Something like that," I replied, tossing my bag onto the floor and sinking into the couch beside him. The warmth of his body was a comfort I hadn't realized I needed until that moment. He handed me a beer, and I took it gratefully, the cold glass grounding me as I tried to calm the storm of emotions swirling inside me. We sat in silence for a while, the soft hum of the TV filling the space between us. It was a comfortable silence, but heavy with unspoken thoughts. After a few minutes, Alex broke the quiet. "Jake," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Can we talk about that night?" My pulse quickened, and I turned to look at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Yeah," I said, though my voice was barely above a whisper. "We can talk about it." He set his beer down on the coffee table, his eyes locking onto mine. "I don't want to make things weird between us," he began, his tone careful but earnest. "But I can't pretend like nothing happened. I feel something, Jake, something I can't ignore." His honesty took my breath away. I wasn't used to this kind of vulnerability, and it made me realize just how much I'd been avoiding my own feelings. "I feel it too," I admitted, my voice shaky but firm. "But I don't know what to do with it. I've always been straight." Alex nodded, his expression understanding. "I get it. I've been there too. But maybe this isn't about labels or definitions. Maybe it's just us. The simplicity of our connection." The simplicity of his words hit me like a wave, and for a moment, all my doubts and fears seemed to fade away. It wasn't about fitting into a box or following a script. It was about the connection we shared, the unspoken bond that had been growing between us for weeks. "What if it doesn't work?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "What if we ruin everything?" Alex's lips curved into a soft smile, and he reached out, his hand brushing against mine. "What if it does work?" he countered. "What if this is something worth taking a chance on?" His words hung in the air, a challenge and an invitation all at once. And as I looked at him, his eyes filled with warmth and sincerity. I realized that I didn't want to live with the regret of not knowing. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life wondering what could have been. Before I could overthink it, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Alex's eyes widened in surprise, but he didn't pull away. Instead, he met me halfway, his lips brushing against mine in a kiss that was both tentative and electric. It was like a spark igniting a flame, and all the tension that had been building between us finally came to a head. The kiss deepened, and I felt myself sinking into it, the rest of the world fading away. Alex's hands moved to my shoulders, steadying me as our movements grew bolder, more confident. It was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, intense and overwhelming, but also incredibly right. When we finally pulled apart, our breaths coming in short, uneven gasps, Alex's eyes searched mine. His expression a mix of hope and uncertainty. "Was that okay?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart racing in my chest. "Yeah," I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. It was more than okay. A slow smile spread across Alex's face, and I felt a warmth bloom in my chest that I couldn't explain. For the first time in weeks, the tension between us felt like it had lifted, replaced by something lighter, something full of possibility. We spent the rest of the evening talking, really talking, for the first time in what felt like forever. Alex told me about his own struggles with identity, the confusion and fear he'd faced before accepting himself, and I found myself opening up in ways I never had before, sharing my own doubts and insecurities without fear of judgment. By the time we finally called it a night, the weight that had been pressing on my chest for weeks seemed to have lifted. As I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I couldn't stop replaying the kiss in my mind. The way Alex's lips had felt against mine, the way his touch had made me feel grounded and alive all at once. I wanted more. I didn't know back then that I would receive more. Back then, I didn't know what the future held for us, but for the first time, I wasn't afraid to find out. I wasn't afraid to take the next step, whatever that might look like, because if there was one thing I was certain of, it was this: Alex was worth the risk. The morning after felt different, yet somehow the same. The sunlight streaming through the window seemed warmer, and the familiar hum of the city outside our apartment seemed more alive, but inside, everything had shifted. Alex and I didn't speak much as we went about our morning routine, but the air between us was heavy with unspoken words, glances lingering longer than usual, smiles exchanged that seemed to carry new meaning. Still, I couldn't stop thinking about the kiss, about the way it had felt so natural, so right, despite everything in my mind screaming that it shouldn't be. It wasn't just the kiss itself that lingered in my thoughts, though. It was the way Alex had looked at me afterward, his eyes filled with a kind of quiet understanding, like he saw right through me and wasn't afraid of what he found. As the day went on, I found myself gravitating toward him in subtle ways. I lingered in the kitchen while he made coffee, our hands brushing as he passed me a cup. I joined him on the couch, sitting a little closer than I normally would, our shoulders occasionally bumping as we scrolled through our phones. Each touch, each moment felt like a spark, igniting something I couldn't quite put into words. By the time evening rolled around, the tension between us had grown into something almost palpable. We hadn't talked about the kiss again, but it was there, hanging in the air between us, waiting to be addressed. I could feel it every time Alex looked at me, every time his hand lingered just a second too long on mine. After dinner, we settled onto the couch to watch a movie, something lighthearted and mindless to fill the silence. But I couldn't focus. My mind was racing, caught between the urge to say something and the fear of ruining whatever fragile balance we'd found. Alex must have sensed my unease because he paused the movie midway and turned to face me, his expression serious but gentle. "Jake," he said softly, his voice cutting through the hum of the TV. "We need to talk." My stomach twisted, but I nodded, setting my drink down on the coffee table. "Yeah," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "We do." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together as he searched for the right words. "I know this is new for you," he began, his tone careful and deliberate. "And I don't want to pressure you into anything you're not ready for. but I need to know where your head is at. I took a deep breath, trying to organize my thoughts. Honestly, I said, meeting his gaze. I don't know. I've spent my whole life thinking I was straight, and now everything feels different. Like I'm seeing things in a way I never have before. Alex nodded, his eyes soft and understanding. That's fair, he said. It is, I admit it, but at the same time, I don't want to ignore this, whatever it is, whatever we are. I want to figure out with you. A slow smile spread across Alex's face, and the tension in my chest eased slightly. That's all I needed to hear, he said softly. The conversation left me feeling lighter, like a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying had been lifted. And as the days turned into weeks, Alex and I began to navigate this new dynamic between us, slowly but surely figuring out what it meant to move from roommates to something more. We didn't rush into anything, didn't try to define what we were too quickly. Instead, we let things unfold naturally, taking each day as it came. We spent more time together, lingering over more coffee and late-night conversations, finding excuses to be close even when we didn't need to be. It was in those quiet moments that I began to understand just how much Alex meant to me. He wasn't just my roommate, wasn't just the guy I'd been living with for the past year. He was the person who made me laugh when I felt like crying, who listened without judgment when I needed to talk, who somehow managed to make the world feel a little less heavy just by being in it. One evening, as we sat on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between us, Alex turned to me with a thoughtful expression. You know, he said, his voice light but serious. I never thought I'd end up here with you. I raised an eyebrow, curious. What do you mean? He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. I don't know. I guess I just never expected this, us. It's not something I planned for. For me, neither. I admitted, my gaze dropping to the bowl of popcorn. But I'm glad it happened. His smile widened, and he reached over, his hand resting lightly on mine. Me too. The warmth of his touch sent a jolt of electricity through me, and I looked up to meet his gaze for a moment. The world seemed to fade away, leaving just the two of us caught in a moment that felt both infinite and fleeting. Before I could second-guess myself, I leaned in, closing the distance between us. Alex met me halfway, his lips soft and warm against mine, and everything else melted away. The kiss was slow, deliberate, filled with a tenderness that took my breath away. When we finally pulled apart, Alex's eyes searched mine, his expression equal parts hopeful and nervous. Are you sure about this? He asked softly, his voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. Yeah, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside me. I'm sure. His smile was all the reassurance I needed. And as we settled back into the couch, my head resting on his shoulder, I realized that whatever this was, it felt right. It didn't matter what anyone else thought or what labels we chose to use. What mattered was that we were in this together, figuring it out one step at a time. But the story didn't end there, because the days that followed our quiet declaration of something deeper felt surreal. Alex and I were exploring uncharted territory, and while it was exhilarating, it also came with moments of uncertainty. But we didn't let it stop us. Instead, we leaned into the unknown, letting our connection deepen with each shared glance, every soft touch, and the quiet comfort of simply being near one another. Our nights became something I started to cherish the most. After dinner, we'd sit together on the couch, not always watching whatever was on the TV. Often, it was just an excuse to be close, to feel the warmth of each other's presence. Sometimes we'd talk about our pasts, our fears, and the things that made us who we were. Other times, we'd sit in comfortable silence, letting the quiet hum of the city fill the spaces between us. One night, as the world outside had settled into its usual rhythm, I found myself lying on the couch with my head resting on Alex's lap, his fingers absent-mindedly running through my hair, and I closed my eyes, savoring the simple intimacy of the moment. It was a kind of closeness I'd never experienced before, one that felt effortless and grounding. Do you ever think about how we got here? Alex asked, his voice low and contemplative. I opened my eyes, looking up at him. His expression was soft, his gaze focused on some distant thought. All the time, I admitted, it's surprising in a way, but I wouldn't change it. He smiled down at me, his hand pausing briefly before resuming its gentle motion through my hair. Neither would I. There was something about the way he said it, the quiet certainty in his voice, that made my chest tighten in the best possible way. It wasn't just words. It was a promise, unspoken but understood. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged, like I'd found a place where I could truly be myself. As the weeks passed, Alex and I fell into a rhythm that felt both new and familiar. We didn't rush anything, didn't try to label what we were or force ourselves into roles that didn't feel natural. Instead, we let things unfold organically, allowing ourselves the time and space to figure out what this meant for both of us. One evening, as we were cooking dinner together, Alex turned to me with a mischievous grin. "You know," he said, his tone teasing, "you're pretty bad at chopping vegetables." I laughed, holding up a rather unevenly sliced carrot. "Hey, I never claimed to be a chef. That's your department." He rolled his eyes, but stepped closer, reaching for the knife in my hand. "Here," he said, guiding my hand with his. "Let me show you how it's done." The proximity made my pulse quicken, and I couldn't help but notice the way his breath brushed against my cheek for a moment. I forgot about the carrot entirely, my focus solely on him. His hands were warm and steady, and as he guided mine, I felt a spark of something I couldn't quite put into words. "See," he said, his voice soft but laced with amusement. "It's not that hard." I nodded, though I barely registered what he'd said. My mind was too occupied with the way he felt so close, the way his presence seemed to envelop me. And before I could stop myself, I turned my head slightly, meeting his gaze. The world seemed to slow, the noise of the kitchen fading into the background as we stood there, frozen in a moment that felt both infinite and fleeting. And then, as if drawn by some invisible force, I leaned in, my lips brushing against his in a kiss that was soft and tentative but filled with all the emotions I couldn't yet articulate. Alex responded immediately, his hands tightening around mine as he deepened the kiss. It was different this time, less hesitant, more certain, and it sent a shiver down my spine. The warmth of his touch, the way he moved with such confidence and care, made my heart race in a way that felt both thrilling and terrifying. When we finally pulled apart, his forehead rested against mine, his breath coming in short, uneven bursts. "You have no idea how much I've wanted to do that," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I smiled, my heart pounding in my chest. "I think I might." Dinner was forgotten after that, replaced by hours spent tangled together on the couch, exploring this newfound closeness with a kind of reverence I hadn't known was possible. Every kiss, every touch felt like a discovery, like we were piecing together a puzzle we didn't know we'd been missing. Eventually, he suggested something I couldn't ignore. "I think you can guess what it is." Wow, I had never done this before, and even though it hurt quite a bit, it was still amazing. It was in the way Alex looked at me while I looked over my shoulder, like I was the only person in the world who mattered. After he was done, he told me it was my turn as he went down. It was crazy, and I had never expected that I would like this with a guy, but apparently I did. Eventually, we laid down beside each other, realizing what had just happened, and as the night wore on, I found myself opening up to him in ways I hadn't with anyone else. I told him about my fears, my insecurities, and the doubts that had always lingered in the back of my mind. And in return, he shared his own, bearing parts of himself that he'd kept hidden from the world. It was in those moments that I realized just how much Alex meant to me. He wasn't just my roommate or my friend. He was the person who made me feel seen, who made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I was enough. And as we fell asleep that night, our bodies twined, and the world outside fading into nothingness, I knew that whatever came next, we would face it together. And then the days turned into weeks, and what had started as an unexpected connection between Alex and me blossomed into something neither of us could ignore. Our lives, once neatly compartmentalized into categories of friendship and convenience, now intertwined in ways I couldn't have predicted, and I didn't want it to stop. One Friday evening, we found ourselves on the couch again, a half-finished bottle of wine between us, the TV murmuring in the background. Alex was telling me about a funny incident at work, his animated gestures punctuating his story, and I couldn't help but watch him with a sense of wonder. "I swear, Jake," he said, his laughter lighting up the room. The guy thought the coffee machine was voice-activated. He just kept shouting latte at it until someone finally showed him the buttons. I chuckled, shaking my head. "You're kidding?" "Not even a little," I said, and Alex grinned. I almost felt bad for him. I loved these moments with him. The way he could make the simplest stories feel like the most important thing in the world. And as I watched him, his face flushed from laughter, I realized just how deeply I'd fallen for him. "You're amazing, you know that?" I said, the words slipping out before I could think to stop them. Alex's smile faltered slightly, his eyes searching mine. "You mean that?" I nodded, setting my glass down and turning to face him fully. "I do. I don't think I've ever met anyone like you, Alex. You make everything better." His gaze softened, and for a moment, he looked almost vulnerable. "You have no idea how much that means to me," he said quietly. "I felt the same way about you for a long time, Jake." The air between us grew heavy, charged with unspoken words and emotions that neither of us could deny any longer. Slowly, Alex reached out, his hand brushing against mine, and I felt a jolt of warmth at the contact. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Of course," I said. "Are you scared?" His eyes held a flicker of uncertainty, a rare break in his usual confidence. I thought about it for a moment, letting his question settle. I admitted, "But not anymore. Not when I'm with you." Alex smiled, his fingers curling around mine. "Good," he said, "because I don't want to be scared either." Without another word, he leaned in, his lips capturing mine in a kiss that was both tender and electric. It wasn't our first kiss, but it felt different, deeper, more certain. Like we were finally embracing everything we'd been holding back. The night unfolded slowly, every touch, every whispered word cementing the bond between us. We didn't rush. We didn't need to. This wasn't about urgency or fleeting passion. It was about connection, about the quiet realization that we had found something rare and extraordinary in each other. As the hours passed, the room seemed to fade away, leaving only us. Alex's hands traced gentle patterns on my skin, his touch both grounding and exhilarating. And when we finally lay together, tangled in the quiet intimacy of the moment, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known I'd been searching for. "Jake," Alex murmured, his voice soft in the darkness. "I don't think I've ever felt like this before." I turned to him, my heart swelling at the vulnerability in his words. "Me neither," I said, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "But I'm glad it's with you." He smiled, his hand finding mine under the covers. "You mean a lot to me," he said quietly. "More than I ever thought someone could." The words hung between us, heavy with meaning, and I felt a warmth spread through my chest. "You mean a lot to me too," I said, "more than I can put into words." We lay there for a while, the silence between us filled with unspoken promises, and as I drifted off to sleep, Alex's arms wrapped securely around me. I knew that this wasn't just a fleeting moment. This was the beginning of something real, something that felt as natural as breathing. The next morning, the sunlight streamed through the window, casting a golden glow over the room. I woke to the sound of Alex's soft breathing, his chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. For a moment, I simply watched him, marveling at how peaceful he looked, how right this all felt. Something in me still refused, but I managed to keep that under control. As if sensing my gaze, Alex stirred, his eyes fluttering open to meet mine. A slow smile spread across his face, and he reached out to brush a hand along my cheek. "Morning," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Morning," I replied, my heart swelling at the simple intimacy of the moment. We spent the day together, unhurried and content, savoring the newfound closeness between us. There were no labels, no need for explanations, just the quiet understanding that we were in this together. Whatever this turned out to be, over time, our relationship grew stronger, each day bringing new moments of connection and understanding. We didn't have all the answers, and there were still times when the uncertainty crept in, but we faced it together, finding strength in each other and in the bond we'd built. Alex became more than my roommate, more than my friend. He became my partner, my confidant, the person I turned to when the world felt too big to face alone, and I knew without a doubt that he felt the same way. Our journey wasn't perfect, it never is, but it was ours, and that made it perfect in its own way. And as we continued to navigate the twists and turns of our lives, I found myself looking forward to the future, knowing that whatever came next, Alex and I would face it together. Because in him, I found something I hadn't known. I was searching for love in its purest, most unexpected form. And for that, I would always be grateful. After all, I'm still not sure if everything's fine, and something in me refuses. Do you have any tips for me on how to solve that? Let me know in the comments. Thanks. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's continue the conversation. What do you think about Jake's journey of self-discovery? And if you're looking for more emotional and heartfelt LGBT stories, be sure to check out the rest of our videos on the channel.